सेव किया था ना?
मैं सिर्फ इसलिए गया था क्योंकि उसने मुझे कॉल किया, that's it. But listen तो.
Save it for someone else.
जिंदगी में सेव करना जरूरी है, मगर जब बात पैसों की हो, सिर्फ सेविंग से काम नहीं चलेगा। इक्विटी म्यूचुअल फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट कीजिए और अपने सेविंग्स को आगे बढ़ने का मौका दीजिए।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Free donuts proclaimed the misspelled placard put up outside the Gurdwara on Old Western Road in Toronto. 4 months earlier, when Indian troops had stormed the Golden Temple in Amritsar in 1984, angry Sikhs had gathered outside the Gurdwara, burning Indian flags and volunteering to join assassination squads. Then, the day after Prime Minister Indira Gandhi was assassinated by her guards, a pop-up stall was set to distribute sweets. Revenge for revenge, it announced. Last week, as a tractor-borne tableau of Indira Gandhi's killing drove through Brampton on Toronto's northwest fringe, Indians reacted with outrage. The macabre celebration of the former Prime Minister's killing, though, is an exceptional or new tableau of almost identical design were driven through Sacramento just in April. Gurdwaras across the West have embraced hagiographic portraiture of Indira Gandhi's assassins, Satwant Singh and Beant Singh, as well as the man responsible for the mid-air bombing of an Air India flight, Talvinder Singh Parmar. In 2008, a group of Sikh students in a Surrey school wore t-shirts praising the separatist Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale. Later that year, British Columbia Premier Gordon Campbell attended a procession where Parmar's images were displayed. For a conversation that goes beyond comforting moral outrage, Indians need to engage with just why the Khalistan movement has proved so tremendously tenacious, if ultimately ineffectual, among diasporic Sikh communities. The answer implicates us all in many discomforting ways. Every story begins somewhere, but in some cases, there isn't a good narrative hook on hand. Early in the last century, large numbers of immigrants began to arrive in Canada looking for work. The sudden appearance of a few thousand Sikhs, coupled with a fairly large population of Chinese labourers, many of whom were also employed in the lumber industry, led to a number of anti-Asian riots, the sociologist James Chadney records. Even though racial restrictions on immigration were imposed and lifted after 1947, Sikh communities felt secure in segregating themselves from the wider milieu, using religion as a means of drawing boundaries between themselves and other ethnic groups. This separatism had very little connection with things going on in India. Although Indira Gandhi had begun sponsoring far-right groups in Punjab to undermine the centre-right Shiromani Akali Dal, it was yet to have a significant impact in Canada. Former Research and Analysis Wing officer GBS Sidhu, who arrived in Toronto in 1976, discovered there were exactly 2 Khalistan supporters living there. Toronto businessman called Kuldeep Singh Sodhi and Uday Singh in Sudbury. In 1971, former Punjab Minister Jagjit Singh Chauhan put out a full-page advertisement in the New York Times demanding an independent Sikh state. 8 weeks or so later, Indian troops captured the city of Dhaka. For good reasons, few took Chauhan's demand for a Sikh state, sponsored by Pakistan, very seriously. Khalistan's would-be plenipotentiary briefly returned to India in 1977, perhaps hoping for a political rehabilitation after the emergency. 2 years later, though, he travelled back to London as it became clear that Indira Gandhi would return to power. He established what he called the Government of Khalistan in Exile in London in 1984. Even if Chauhan did not succeed in creating foundations for a violent insurgency in Punjab, problems flared in the Sikh diaspora in Canada. Local labour activist Kuldeep Singh Samra, a one-time communist involved in the anti-racism movement, claimed to have been inspired by Chauhan's piety and vowed support for Khalistan, journalists Zohair Kashmiri and Brian McAndrew have written. Kuldeep evidently hoped Chauhan's support would help capture control of the Pape Avenue Gurdwara and its vast endowments. Samra had lost the elections in 1977 and 1978, despite support from a cohort of young, sometimes violent, anti-racism vigilantes. The power struggle for the Gurdwaras kept escalating until Kuldeep ended up shooting a judge and a political rival dead inside a Toronto courtroom. He then fled to India. Eventually, the government of India extradited Kuldeep to Canada in 2013, where he is still serving a life term. The bombing of Air India 182 in 1985, carried out, we now know, thanks to an official investigation under the benign gaze of Canada's intelligence services, demonstrated that elements of groups like the Babbar Khalsa International or International Sikh Youth Federation had become a transnational terror threat. There were other things going on within the Sikh community in Canada, though, which illustrated an even deeper crisis. For one, pro-Khalistan groups began a murderous war against secular figures in the community. Tara Singh Heer, a journalist who played a key role as a prosecution witness in the Air India case, was murdered in 1998. Many others were killed in the struggle to take control of Gurdwaras. For another, a new generation of Sikh youth became enmeshed in gangsterism, drawing on the zeitgeist among the immigrant milieu. Inspired by ethnic Latin gangs running drug networks throughout the United States, Bhupinder Bindi Johal and John Dosanjh, Bal Bhuttar became icons of a second-generation assertion of identity. The scholar Manjeet Pabla has noted that Bhupinder was a folk hero to many youth. In some cases, even the cause of the killings wasn't apparent. The aging Air India bomber, later Prime Minister Narendra Modi supporter Ripudaman Singh Malik, was murdered by contract killers in July 2022 and is speculated to have been paid the price for his gangland deals, reneging on Khalistan, and as punishment for his involvement in terrorism. Take your pick. The violence that runs through diasporic Sikh communities is in some sense evidence of the failures of countries like Canada and the United Kingdom to genuinely integrate immigrants into their wider milieu. Largely cut off from the wider white Canadian community, anthropologist Parminder Bhattal has perceptively observed, the term Khalistan became an identity marker for young Sikhs. Instead of being a call for a tangible, sovereign state, as we understand it in India, it served as a means for young Sikhs, and I quote, to distinguish themselves from other Canadian youth, particularly non-Sikh South Asian youth. Following a visit to Canada for a family wedding, a prominent Amritsar resident told scholar Paramjit Judge, I quote again, there was not a single white man among the invitees. After having stayed for so long, the Sikhs have not become part of Canadian society. Scholar Jaspal Singh has noted how British pro-Khalistan rap invokes tropes of trauma and nationhood not as a call to war in some distant land, but to build a cultural identity that distinguishes itself from South Asian Hindus and Muslims. Frontiers of the community are maintained not just by this invocation of Khalistan or a separate Sikh state, but by the often brutal punishment of miscegenation, through forced marriages, or through the social isolation of cultural rebels. The scholar Ajay Sani has noted that even in India, the Khalistan movement is just a simulacrum of the armed insurgency it once was. Terror attacks have had to be conducted not by ideologically motivated recruits in either the West or in India, but by small-time criminals and gangsters. Few people have been killed as a result of terrorism in Punjab for the last decade. Crimes of passion or greed claim far greater numbers than this so-called sacred cause. Even as India protests the macabre display of Indira Gandhi's assassination, it's worth considering exactly how much it amounts to. Last year, the Shiromani Gurdwara Prabandhak Committee, which maintains Gurdwaras across Punjab, installed a portrait of Dilawar Singh, the suicide bomber who killed Chief Minister Beant Singh, in the Golden Temple. The museum in the temple has long hosted portraits of the killers of the Prime Minister and various other terrorists. The Indian government has long believed, rightly or wrongly, that allowing such displays enables marginal movements to get dissolved into the mainstream of politics. Even after Chauhan issued his famous advertisement and after Indira Gandhi's killing, Rajiv Gandhi allowed him to return home in 1989. An unofficial blacklist barring Khalistan activists in the West from coming home was removed in 2019. Forgetting is indeed a powerful tool of healing. But for it to work, a genuine reckoning with the truth must come first. The inability of Indians, whatever their religion, to have an introspective conversation about the past, the bombing of the Air India flight, the 1984 riots, the storming of the Golden Temple, the Prime Minister's killing, has poisoned relationships among the Indian diaspora and at home. I know what a ghost is, wrote the famous writer Salman Rushdie. Unfinished business, that's what. It's time for India to lay its ghosts to rest. I'm Praveen Swami and I'm National Security Editor of ThePrint. Thank you for watching Security Code.